Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Today I am going to deliver a lesson for class 12th, subject zoology. Now we have started a new chapter, human health and disease, and we have already discussed about the diseases caused by the protozoa, their prevention and the possible treatments. Now today we will discuss about some of the important bacterial diseases. First of all, we will discuss about the most common bacterial infection in human beings, that is known as the typhoid fever. This typhoid fever is caused by the infection with a gram-negative, a rod-shaped gram-negative flagellated bacteria known as Salmonella typhi, as you can see in this sketch. It is also caused by another strain of this bacteria that is known as Salmonella paratyphi, which has the serotypes as A, B and C. Since this infection usually affects our intestines, that is why it is also known as the enteric fever. Enteric pertains to the intestines, so we may call it an intestinal fever or enteric fever. Now, the transmission of this infection is usually by direct or indirect contact with contaminated food and water. So, it is a food or waterborne infection. The incubation period of this infection ranges from 1 to 3 weeks. Now, first of all, we must understand what do you mean by incubation period. Incubation period is basically the time between the primary infection of the bacteria up to the appearance of the symptoms in the host. And this time period is called as incubation period, and it varies from infection to infection. The symptoms of this disease are, number first, the most prominent symptom is a stepwise, or we may call it as a ladder type fever that usually goes up to 39 to 40 degrees Celsius. Along with the fever, the patient experiences the weakness, abdominal pain, headache, constipation or diarrhea, anorexia, that means the decreased or loss of appetite. In the late phase of this infection, this bacteria may invade the organs like liver, spleen, and it causes the swelling or inflammation of the liver, that is known as hepatomegaly, or inflammation of the spleen known as splenomegaly. Sometimes in severe cases, this infection may cause intestinal perforation or even the death in severe cases. Since this infection is diagnosed by various tests like blood tests, urine examinations. Now, once the infection is suspected in a person, this diagnosis is confirmed by a well-known test known as the Vidal test. So Vidal test is a confirmatory test for the diagnosis of typhoid fever. Now, so far the prevention of this infection is concerned, prevention is done by taking fresh water, and good sanitation and personal hygiene are the keys for the prevention of this infection. And nowadays, vaccination is also available for this infection. That is, 2 vaccines are available presently. Number 1 is the older vaccine, which is known as V1 polysaccharide vaccine. Now the latest vaccine which is available to control this infection is the typhoid conjugate vaccine. Now this typhoid conjugate vaccine is considered superior over the older one because its efficacy rate is 91% and it is given from the age of 9 months. Now the treatment of this infection is done by treating the patient with first-line fluoroquinolones, ceftriaxone, azithromycin, etc., but under the advice of an expert physician, obviously. Now, the second important bacterial infection is what we call as diphtheria. So diphtheria is an acute infection caused by a gram-negative rod-shaped bacterium known as Corynebacterium diphtheriae. This infection occurs most commonly in children in the age group of 2 to 5 years. Now, the transmission of this infection from one person to another person is usually through droplet methods like coughing, sneezing, kissing, and also the infection is spread by using the contaminated articles, etc. The incubation period of this infection of the diphtheria ranges from 1 to 5 days. Now, this pathogen, once it gains the entry into the body, it produces an exotoxin at the site of its infection. And if this infection is in the epithelial membrane of the nasal passage, then it causes this exotoxin causes epithelial necrosis of the nose. Necrosis means the cell death, and consequently it leads to nasal diphtheria. Similarly, if this pathogen infects causes the epithelial necrosis of tonsils or throat, then that type of diphtheria is also known as pharyngeal diphtheria. And sometimes it also causes laryngotracheal diphtheria when the epithelial necrosis of larynx and trachea takes place by this infection. Now, the symptoms of this disease include initially mild fever with sore throat and headaches. Now, the late symptoms of this infection are oozing of semi-solid material out of the infected region and formation of gray or false tough membrane that may sometimes choke or block the air passages and may prove fatal. The treatment is given by treating the patient with antitoxin, which immediately neutralizes this exotoxin, and an antibiotic cover is given to control the infection. The antibiotics may include erythromycin and penicillin, which are the drug of choice for treating these infections. Now, if the membrane is formed, this porous membrane is formed, it is removed surgically. Nowadays, there is a vaccine available for the diphtheria, which is also known as triple vaccine or is known as DPT, which provides immunity against diphtheria, pertussis means the whooping cough, and tetanus. Now, this was all about the two most important bacterial infections, that is the typhoid fever and diphtheria. Now, you must remember at least that this typhoid fever is the causative agent of the typhoid fever is Salmonella typhi or paratyphi. It is also known as enteric fever. The main symptoms are fever, headache, abdominal pain, constipation, diarrhea, etc. The diagnosis is done by the Widal test, and vaccines are also available for treating the disease. Similarly, diphtheria, the causative organism for the diphtheria is a gram-positive rod-shaped bacteria known as Corynebacterium diphtheriae. This infection is spread by droplet methods, and this bacteria may produce the exotoxin, which causes the necrosis of the site or where it infects. The main symptoms of diphtheria are mild fever, sore throat, headache, and formation of the gray or false tough membrane at the site of infection. That is all about the typhoid and diphtheria. Now, in our next topic, we will study about other bacterial infections. Until then, goodbye and good luck.